I wonder if you've ever heard the saying, we are all the heroes of our own stories. What it means is when we recount our stories to others, about people perhaps who we struggle with, we present the case that suits us best, that makes us look good. And to be honest, I think we all do. I was recently trying to hold the middle ground between a little spat that my father and my brother had. They had this little falling out, and I was on the phone to my brother listening to him. And, he was defending himself and he had some fair points, but I was also trying to point out why perhaps there was another way to look at it. Now, the truth is, it's easy to judge. It's easy to have a loose tongue and to gossip. It's harder to understand. It's harder to show grace and to forgive. Today we have one of the most famous parables that Jesus ever spoke on. The parable of the Prodigal Son, also known as the lost son. And when we read a parable, when we read any kind of parable or teaching from Jesus, it's good practice to ask ourselves where we are in the story, who perhaps we are in the story. How does this parable, this lesson, challenge me? How does it encourage me? What can I learn from it? And it might be that at different times of your life, you may feel like different characters in the story. Now, when we first look at this parable, we can concentrate on the lost son, who squanders his money, who goes to a foreign country, ends up sleeping down on the floor with pigs before he returns to his father. But many scholars have concluded that this story is primarily about the older son, rather than the prodigal son. The older brother in the story is a picture of the Pharisees and the religious leaders. He's angry and he's resentful about his wayward brother. He's angry that his wayward brother has been welcomed home with such joy. He doesn't understand his father, and he doesn't understand his father's heart. Just as the Pharisees didn't understand what Jesus was teaching them. The Pharisees didn't understand how gracious God was and how he welcomes the lost. Now, despite the diverse audience that Jesus was speaking to, Jesus was really directly speaking to the religious leaders about the law, about how they understood the law. He was aiming straight into the darkness of their hearts and pleading with them to lay aside their own trust in their own righteousness, their own works. As Ephesians tell us, it is by grace you have been saved through your faith, and that this is not from yourselves, it is a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. The religious leaders of the day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, were trusting in works-based justification rather than experiencing salvation by God's grace through their faith. Like the older brother in the parable, they viewed themselves as worthy sons. By telling them this parable, Jesus was making clear God's love has no limits, and he longs for all his children to come home, no matter how far they've wandered. The story is a reminder that none of us, no one, has ever gone too far to receive God's grace. Whether we identify with the rebellious younger son or the self-righteous older brother, the Father's invitation is the same. Come home. Come home. God is always ready to embrace, to forgive, and to restore us when we turn to him. It is a beautiful picture of the gospel, and it is relevant today and every day as it was in the time that Jesus taught it. Lent is this time when we reflect on our weakness. We might reflect on who we are. We need to see ourselves as unworthy. We cannot, if we don't see ourselves as people in need, as unworthy, then we cannot fall upon the grace of God. We cannot reach out for that. We need to recognize that there is within each of us a spiritual kind of destitution. It is only the needy who seek mercy, who seek and reach out for a saving hand of Christ. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Let's look at both brothers again. So you know the story. The prodigal son begins with the younger son making a bold and quite a dishonorable request. He asks his father for a share in the inheritance, And he asks this as an early point. This was a very a wretched act to do. It stands in the day that when, obviously as it is today, when someone passes, they have a will, and in their will they bequeath their inheritance to people, and you receive that when someone dies. The fact that this younger son is asking for his inheritance now is basically an interpretive way of saying, I wish you were dead, I want what's mine. So he insults this father, and then he leaves, and he pursues this kind of crazy debauched life of gambling, prostitution, just going out and doing and seeking all these highs and these ways of the world to try and get some kind of excitement or thrills or whatever it might be in his life. He goes to a foreign country, it says, a distant land. And this is a kind of, not just a physical distance, but it's also a spiritual, an emotional distance, a detachment from God that sin leads us to. We were told he has reckless living. But eventually he has this moment where he wakes up to himself and he realizes, what am I doing? How have I got here? This clarity, and he sees that even his father's servants are better off than he is, and he willingly comes back. He comes back to home. And the father sees him and runs to him, embraces him, puts a cloak on him, a ring on his finger, kills the fattened calf, and welcomes him back. And then we jump to the other son. And suddenly the story jumps to the other son in the way that the other son is annoyed by this. And you can sympathize with him. You see what's going on. I've always worked for you. I've been here for you. I've never squandered. You didn't even give me a goat to share with my friends. And how does the father deal with that son? It's interesting to note. Just as he runs to the younger son, we're told he goes out to the older son as well. The father goes out to him as well. He compassionately speaks to the older son as well as the younger son. He invites him back in. He says, come back, enjoy the celebration. He says this to the older son, my son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. The father isn't angry or dismissive at either son. He gently reminds the older son of his place in the family. He reassures him that he hasn't been forgotten. In this story, the father's love is consistent to both sons, and there is no need to compete for his love and affection. The celebration of the younger son doesn't take anything away from the older son, and he wants them both to know his love and to be welcomed in his house. Some of us may even identify with the father figure in the story. Maybe we have family members who have perhaps gone astray, or want nothing to do with us, or have rejected the Christian faith. Even though many of us have heard the parable multiple of times, we can always glean new lessons, new stories, new teachings from it perhaps. And whether we recognize ourselves in the story, we might recognize someone else in our vicinity in the story. But as we look at it today, we need to realize that both sons are prodigal sons. Both sons have had a rejection and have both been welcomed back by their father. Both are loved. Both are reminded of their place in the home. Today is Mother's Day, and I want to kind of draw on the theme of motherhood today as well, because this is a very much a passage about father running out, but we often think of God as father, and it is a common image used in the scripture, and so it is good and right that we use this imagery of God as father, but it is not exclusive in the Bible. The Bible speaks in anthropomorphic language that we understand. And these images are frequently masculine, but the Bible does also employ feminine imagery to describe God's love for us and his relationship with the world. Here's just a couple of examples. As one whom a mother comforts, so I will comfort you. You shall be comforted in Jerusalem. That's from Isaiah. Can a woman forget her nursing child, that she should have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, yet I will not forget you. Jesus talks about chicks being gathered under a mother hen's wing. And there are other feminine references used as well. There is no specific gender to God. God is spirit. And within him, he has attributes of both male and female, both mother and father. Now, we have Rembrandt's picture over there. I don't know if you've ever noticed it. It's a great painting by Rembrandt, one of his greatest. And its title is The Return of the Prodigal Son. It's seen as one of his greatest paintings. In fact, someone said that when you see it in person, you could be forgiven for saying it's the greatest painting that anyone's done. Now, Rembrandt himself, in the height of his career, had painted this picture of the prodigal son. But he painted him when he's carousing, when he's on his jaunt in this distant land. And Rembrandt actually painted himself as the prodigal son. And he painted himself holding up a glass of wine that was kind of spilling. It's like, ah. And he did that painting. But towards the end of his life, he painted this one. And he had lost a lot by this point. 3 of his children had died in infancy. 2 children who survived infancy both passed away before him. And his wife, Saskia, died in childbirth. He had suffered a huge amount, was lonely and cut off. And the heartbroken painter was unable to paint for several years, and he lost his favour in society. This painting was the painting that he did. The painting captures the son returning after squandering his father's inheritance. We can go to the first slide. So the son kneels before the father, begging for his mercy. And he's missing a sandal, if you can see. His head is shaved as a slave would be, and his clothes are torn. He is both broke and broken. Off to the right stands his older brother. If you can do the second slide. That's the older brother. Brother perfectly dressed, staring down, and he is wringing his hands as a sign of judgment. Crossing his hands in a disapproving choice that his brothers have made. And the way that he's kind of frustrated. And if you go back to the first one again, the father is royally dressed, emanating light. It's like the light comes off him and radiates around, compassionately leaning forward. He envelops his son with both arms. If you can go to the third slide. Now, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do, but his hands are often seen as the imagery of God as both father and mother. His left hand is muscular, large, and it's on his shoulder. It's as if he's pulling him in. It's seen as God's strong, masculine justice, protection sign. But the other hand is softer, is gentle, and is often seen as a feminine within God. Gentle, loving, meeting the son's pain. You see it's a little bit lower down the back, more like a gentle embrace. We are to show love and compassion. We are to rely on God's grace, not our own works. And I want us to reflect on God's compassion as both loving Father and gracious Mother. When we think of motherhood and Mother's Day and mothering in the Bible, often our minds will go to Mary. Mary in the Bible who, sometimes within the Catholic Church, the attributes of the feminine, of the divine are read into her, for good or for ill. It can lead sometimes to perhaps an over-devotion or even a worship. But obviously, while Mary can and should be honoured, only God should be worshipped. But Mary is a great example of compassion and mercy and of sacrifice too. She gave birth to a son who was destined to die. At the cross, I don't know if you remember, at the cross Jesus speaks his final words. And it is often seen as one was dying on the cross that anything that they said verbally was their right to give out, in a sense, their dying requests, their will. And so whatever was said on the cross of someone dying was taken as that is what should be done, as their will. Jesus on the cross says to John, "John, this is your mother." And he says to Mary, "Mary, this is your son." He is naming that, and that is seen as his last testament. But it is also, some theologians and scholars read in that Jesus is naming Mary not just as his mother, but the mother of disciples, and that John represents that. And so in a sense, there is this motherhood over discipleship as well that is sometimes read into it. However you view Mary, she is a wonderful example of a compassionate, loving mother in the Bible. We're going to move to a reflection time, and I've asked Verity if she would sing for us, and she's going to sing the Ave Maria, which is just a beautiful, beautiful song. And as she sings it, maybe you want to just listen to the words, listen to the voice. Maybe you want to reflect on what we've been talking about as which character do you find yourself as within the story of the Prodigal Son? Who do you associate with? Ultimately, the teaching for us all is we are all called to become the Father. All of us are formed to be the person who meets not in judgment, not in anger, but who meets people with compassion and love, with mercy and forgiveness. And so whatever character you may feel like, the journey of every Christian is to become the father in the Prodigal Son, the one who deals with both sons with love and compassion.